Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda believes NATO should allow Ukraine to strike deep into Russia in response to DPRK troop deployment and increase military assistance to Ukraine. Is it possible to launch strikes on Russian territory if the decision hasn't been made, and it's unclear whether DPRK troops will enter Ukraine? Currently, discussions focus solely on their use in the Kurdish region, a topic openly addressed by our friends and partners abroad. I completely agree with you, and I will start from the end. The President of the United States said that Ukraine has the right to strike North Korean troops if they cross the border of Ukraine. If they are in the Kursk region, should we just watch them and give them flowers when they attack our military? Well, this is a kind of statement that is the basis of my next thesis. It is unlikely that we will be granted such a permit before the elections, because the long range, so-called long range, because the military says that this is not a long range, but it is probably a medium or short range. What we are asking for is hostage to the U.S. election, so to expect that the actual real involvement of another nuclear power in a war against Ukraine would be considered an escalation is a futile exercise because it is an obvious thing. But there is a logic to the election, and it dictates this behavior to our partners, primarily the Americans.
І вона диктує саме таку поведінку нашим партнерам. В першу чергу американцям.
Regarding long-range weapons, the New York Times wrote that they had learned how, as part of non-public details, Zelensky's victory plan, he asked Washington for long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles. The question seems fantastical. Can we ask attackers to hit Russian territory up to 400 kilometers? We're told, God forbid, yet they seek 1,500-kilometer missiles that can reach much further. I've commented on this today, and I've probably had enough. I'm concerned that secrets often leak into articles, suggesting manipulation to divert attention, or that those involved can't keep quiet. This is problematic, especially during a war, as most leaks come from their side. We need to be more cautious in our assessments of the press.
До таємниць рот не закривається. Це дуже погана ситуація, тому що ці витоки здебільшого з їхньої сторони, з сторони партнерів. Це не дуже корисна практика.
Perhaps it's my assumption, perhaps it's a fantasy of foreign journalists, but again, something is changing the emphasis here and distorting, most likely, the reality. Yes, hypothetically, there could have been such a request from Ukraine, but not in the clause that allows us to strike now.
Те, що змінюють акценти і викривляють, скоріше за все, реальність. Тому що так, в цьому плані, гіпотетично, наголошую, могло бути така...
The point about providing Ukraine with non-nuclear weapons, missile deterrence, is after the war is over, so that this scum doesn't come back to us again. These missiles should have been hypothetically located somewhere, because military experts say that there are no ground-based installations for launching these missiles, or they are being developed. They are mostly launched from ships or submarines, and this is not realistic for Ukraine right now. Journalists either misunderstood the situation or distorted it. I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but consider this scenario. The claim about a powerful weapon Ukraine allegedly requested amplifies attention and distracts from the fact that we're not receiving simpler weapons. It makes it seem like Ukrainians are asking for something unrealistic. What is there to discuss? This plan is fantastic. Yes, this may be the case, because we have repeatedly seen in the foreign press that this plan is not comprehensive, that it is designed only for partners, that Ukraine is not there. Ukraine is there, and even in this plan, it proposes to replace American troops with NATO troops in Europe or somewhere else. Is this a step towards them, or is it about nothing at all? Moreover, As far as I understand, a plan is being prepared for Ukraine itself. That's why it seems to me that there is a lot of, how to put it correctly, foreign press.
Україна навіть в цьому плані пропонує замінити американські війська свого часу на
science fiction around the military and around electoral issues. And these waves appear, hypothetically, to study our reaction, perhaps the reaction of the population of a country. Then they disappear, then they reappear, and it doesn't look like they are sharing information. It's manipulated and, let's say, pushed, in particular politicians. Maybe we are being pushed to make some decisions. This is a very bad practice. We need to take Putin by the ears and push him to a just peace, not force us to take any action and show that we want a lot. We do want a lot, for a second, really a lot. We want to survive, and this allows us to resort to any requests, to any actions, because the price for us is very high.
Це маніпулюють і, скажімо так, підштовхують в тому числі і там політиків, можливо, і нас.
Ultimately, Putin needs to be taken by the ears, but whether they want to do it is a debatable question that we will definitely address. Here's what I thought about these tomahawks. This news, not just tomahawks, but this particular article from the New York Times.
І це нам дозволяє вдаватися до будь-яких прохань, до будь-яких дій, тому що у нас ціна дуже висока.
Зрештою, Путіна треба брати за вуха, але чи вони хочуть це робити? Це теж питання.
They wrote it, citing an unnamed source, as if they had some interlocutor. But one way or another, can these missiles be used by Ukraine after the war? Perhaps some kind of security agreement? Is this all designed for the future of Ukraine, not the present?
Чи інакше, чи можуть ці ракети стати на озброєння України після війни? Можливо, які безпекові угоди, це все розраховано на майбутнє України, а не на теперішнє?
Yes, I completely agree with you 100%, because the plan says so. As far as I understand, we have not seen the secret annex. The New York Times did, so they must have misread this clause, because it's about ending the war and about guarantees until we conditionally join NATO or some other decisions. It was a non-nuclear missile, non-nuclear deterrent. That was the point. It just didn't mention the nomenclature. Let's hope that our friends and partners will find a solution, because the only guarantee of security is how we can protect ourselves and not rely on our friends, as we have done, by the way, more than once.
Як ми зможемо захистити самі себе, а не покладатися на наших друзів, як ми це вже робили, до речі, і не один раз.
Meanwhile, the Romanian Ministry of Defense has drafted a bill that would allow the destruction, neutralization, or interception of drones that violate their country's airspace. Should we expect a similar step from other countries that are not directly alluding to Poland, which are also frequently targeted by Russian drones? And not just drones. It is very good to set a precedent, because it fits into the security logic of every country, because this Popola is probably not flying to Brussels, but to a specific village. Even if it's just flying, we see how much trouble they are causing in Ukraine, and we see it every day. I welcome this step. Will Poland support it? I would like to, but here each country will not have the political will, but the political expediency to do something. Can it be done? Who really influences these decisions?
Кожної країни буде цей там не політична воля, а політична доцільність щось робити, да? Чи можна це робити? Хто на ці рішення впливає насправді? Я натякаю в тому числі на Сполучені Штати, що іноді вони в кейсі Польщі...
I am also referring to the United States, because sometimes in the case of Poland, for example, no one can convince me that it was a Ukrainian missile, and the United States managed to convince the Polish side. This topic simply disappeared and dissolved in the information noise and is no longer raised. Big politics can get involved here, but the precedent has been set, and I'll say this cautiously, and this is already a lot. Basically, we will watch how this develops. because, as you said, it fits into the security logic of countries, but it's not clear why they do not do it. I understand concerns about giving certain missiles, as it could make them a party to the war. However, if a foreign missile is approaching, there's a risk it could malfunction. Anything can happen, even if it might turn around and fly away. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban visited Tbilisi and during a press conference thanked the Georgian Dream party, stating that the Georgian government prevented Georgia from becoming a second Ukraine. Why, in your opinion, was such a statement made if part of Georgia is already occupied by the Russians and their country is actually under full Russian control? It seems that everyone has the same textbook. Well, friends in Russia, because at least the Georgian authorities and Orban have exactly the same textbook. I would like to remind our viewers, if they haven't seen the banners and commercials in Georgia before the elections, that in order to avoid what happened in Ukraine, they should vote for us. And they showed the ruined Mariupol, some bridges rebuilt by this political force. This politician came here, to say the least, and said the same thing. Not Ukraine, but what business is it of yours to Ukraine? You do everything in your countries to make your people live normally, and don't come here if you can't help us, but rather serve us. And then Russia will come, as Kaka Kaladze said, and solve the issue of the occupied territories, development, or something else. Well, dear friends, how long can we ride on the hills of Ukraine? I never tire of repeating the classic, the Maidan, but let's just say it's more like an anti-Maidan. I'm trying my best here, but I have the impression that Orban is traveling and serving Putin's interests 100%. Did anyone invite him to go there? He was spat on and called names that I can't say now, but I would like to say on air, and Georgians told him who he really is. If he likes being called that, let him go.
Якщо йому подобається, що його так називають, хай їздить. І чому втручатися в справи Грузії? Вони ще не вирішили.
Why interfere in unresolved Georgian affairs? Perhaps the opposition can turn the tide, although I'm skeptical. It's unwelcome when someone from another country comes to Hungary to praise your opponents instead of you. It suggests audacity, as if they're making peace on behalf of the EU, while the EU distances itself, stating it's Orban's personal position. He is involved in the legalization of the same violations because, in fact, the elections were not democratic. He came and supported this. It seems that the head of Venezuela also supported, well, a kind of company for a member of NATO, the European Union, a supposedly democratic state. I don't know, but it doesn't surprise me.
Така собі компанія для члена НАТО, Євросоюзу, начебто демократичної держави.
Where Orban is, there is no bottom. But in the end, as you said, if he likes it, he must like it, because if he didn't like it, he wouldn't have gone. But in fact, despite these visits to the EU, as they say we have nothing to do with it, it does not represent our interests. But they said the same thing about Beijing. Despite these visits that are taking place now, despite his anti-Ukrainian statements, despite the fact that the DPRK troops are already on the territory of the Russian Federation, and they have already been spotted in Kursk region. U.S. intelligence and the Pentagon oppose long-range strikes on Russian territory, but what might change their minds? There's much discussion about how the U.S. elections could influence key decisions. If Biden conditionally allows Ukraine's NATO candidacy between November 5th and January 20th, long-range strikes might be authorized. So why not act now? You know, the more I listen to Biden, the more I am far from believing that he can take such steps. Basically, he needs to complete his political background.
Йому треба цей політичний там бекграунд свій завершити, тобто створити, да?
I mean, it is logical to create it now, with such steps as you call it. But these blanket statements that, well, are just surprising that Ukraine has the right, and we will not, say, do something or prohibit it if Ukraine wants to hit these North Korean troops there. Well, how can you forbid us?
Бити по цим північно-корейським військам. Ну так, як ви нам будете забороняти? Вони нас йдуть вбивати, а ми на них дивитися будемо, да? І оці заяви про те, що, там, от як...
They're coming to kill us, and we're just going to watch. Statements about waiting for a call from Washington before we can act against invaders are frustrating. Is that really how it works? No, we can't let them go for now. They'll get to Kyiv as long as they decide. So I am far from being an optimist. I was a very big optimist in the sense that Biden will use these few months, or the month that he has left, to make history, but he will most likely make history with Chamberlain or someone else.
Разом з Чемберленом або ще з кимось, скоріше за все, він туди йде таким шляхом, тому що політика деескалації, тріщить по швам, щоб не сказати...
Most likely he is going this way because the policy of de-escalation is, well, bursting at the seams. Not to say that it is discredited. I'm just waiting, not waiting, but as a figure of speech, who else will raise their head? That is, while they were suffering from this sickness of deterrence, they were giving us and Israel drip aid, by the way, Israel a little more, because they do shoot down missiles and chess pieces. But it's about the fact that the United States has now ceased to be the world's gendarme. They have always been able to do it, and there was more or less order. But now they are demonstrating that if they are a gendarme, they are the one who, like in American movies, will bring out the cake a little more, drink a glass of whiskey or wine, and then someone will jump out of the cake, say goodbye, and that's it. It's like a cop movie. No, it can't be like that. The world is facing a very serious challenge now, and someone has to be an adult. But there are no adults now, or if there are, they are just looking at Washington. The adults have run out for now. But I wonder why this transitional period in the United States after the election, roughly from November 5th to almost the end of January, is called a window of opportunity. If Biden greenlights Ukraine's NATO invitation and allows long-range strikes on Russia during the transition period, could a successor cancel this? They might withhold missiles in future aid packages or delay Ukraine's NATO membership.
Наприклад, не дати ракет в наступних пакетах допомоги чи загальмувати членство України в НАТО.
Well, we hope that the next president will be the president of a great power, a mega power that has a significant impact on the international situation. I hope so. Hypothetically, this development could happen if Trump wins and Biden tries to make life difficult for him at the beginning of his term. Although I think it will be very difficult there anyway, if they are running so close together, then anything can happen, including some internal problems in the United States.
Хоча я думаю, що там і так буде дуже непросто. Якщо вони йдуть так поряд, то там може бути що завгодно, в тому числі які...
So it may not be up to that, not to Ukraine again. However, I completely agree with you that if Trump comes in, he can actually do it. It will just be a blow to his reputation, as if Biden gave him an opportunity and Trump conditionally took it away. Whether this will happen or not is still a fantasy. Now, we are fantasizing about this topic because, after all, the United States has a real election, not like in Russia or Belarus where everyone knows, they just don't know how many % it will be, whether it will be 80 or 85. So anyway, this situation is not really useful for us because it will irritate Trump conditionally if we take this scenario and his elections are not yet close. Therefore, he will not pay attention to any cries from the Democrats and will not pay attention to any criticism from Europe, because Europe is afraid of him, to put it mildly.
зважати на якісь там крики з боку демократів, да? І не буде зважати на...
But I am glad to see that sane countries are preparing for the fact that they will have to take the security issues in Europe on their shoulders. And we can thank Trump for this, because it is only because he can come that such moments happen. So the United States can surprise. But you know, the question here is different. Which way?
Тому що це тільки із-за того, що він може прийти, відбуваються такі моменти. Тому Сполучені Штати, вони можуть здивувати.
It's a good question, and we'll find out the answer on the 5th in just a few days. But in terms of countering the Russian Federation and the occupiers, Zelensky said in an interview with the Times of India that this country can help end the war in Ukraine by blocking Russia's economy.
The Times of India заявив, що ця країна може допомогти закінчити війну в Україні, заблокувавши економіку Росії.
The president believes G20 leaders can pressure Putin to end the war, emphasizing the need for action rather than talk, as the ongoing conflict results in daily casualties.
Але чи готові лідери країн Великої Двадцятки?
Are G20 leaders ready to restrict the Russian economy? If they truly wanted to, they likely would have done so by now. Many G20 leaders, including those in BRICS, continue signing treaties and agreements with Russia. India buys oil at discounts, Turkey transits goods, and other countries help Russia acquire necessary technologies through black markets. But they still have this opportunity. It's not that these countries really want to limit the Russian Federation. It's beneficial to them, at least for the moment. There are 2 points here. First, we have to appeal to India, because we have been having a dialogue since the Prime Minister visited us, and he's been quite neutral as a Prime Minister in a country. This isn't ideal. The president stated that India should stop buying oil as it funds Russia's weapons and leads to more deaths in Ukraine. Will they listen? We'll see. But business often outweighs moral concerns. I agree that we should appeal to the G20. Their silence allows others to speak for them.
Дослухаються, не дослухаються. Бачимо, що поки що бізнесові питання, вони домінують над моральними, скажу так.
This is a simple truth, so everything is logical. But where I agree with you is that the BRICS, for example, is generally designed to kill the G20 as such and to take a swing at the G7. Here they may have more success in destroying the G20 over time. But as for the G7, I don't think they will succeed. Therefore, we cannot expect the G20 to be able to stop Russia. But there are many countries that nodded their heads in Kazan and are living off this war. Will they be able to give up their excess profits?
Зупинити Росію, можна, але там багато країн, які кивали головою в Казані, да? І які за рахунок цієї війни живуть. Чи зможуть вони відмовитися від надприбутків?
Most likely not, but we need to engage with leaders who influence the global south. As the saying goes, water wears away at a stone. And perhaps the political situation will align for a major country to challenge Russia. However, we must remember that Russia is not like the DPRK or Venezuela, which are already begging for help due to sanctions.
Але якщо говорити за обмеження Російської Федерації як держави, тобто ми в першу чергу маємо звертати, пам'ятати...
As the 11th largest economy in the world, Russia is hard to impress and can still retaliate if restricted due to its oil and gas sales, transit agreements, and global institutional presence. Even if these institutions are inactive, Russia benefits from them. I agree that some European countries continue to buy energy resources from Russia, even during this war. They help us with one hand while funding Russia's energy resources with the other. As a result, Russia can strike and manipulate situations, like it did with Saudi Arabia, without violating agreements. This reaction exists because some want to profit, while others fear losing opportunities. Unfortunately, today's wars lack clear sides, unlike past conflicts that could be resolved on the battlefield. Now, there are many players with diverse interests. Take Europe. It wants us not to lose, but it does not want, for example, to reduce the nuclear component to zero because it is unprofitable. Countries also continue to buy resources in one form or another.
Хтось на ній хоче заробити, а хтось боїться, що він втратить якісь можливості. І це нинішні війни такі. На превеликий жаль, закінчились ті війни, які там чітко було зрозуміло з одного.
They have not developed realistic and effective methods for secondary sanctions. And even if they have, they sometimes turn a blind eye to how someone circumvents them.
Зараз дуже багато гравців. І у гравців різнопланові інтереси. От беремо Європу, вони хочуть, щоб ми не програли, але й не хоче, наприклад, атомну складову під ноль пустити, тому що це невигідно. Також ресурси купують в тому чи іншому вигляді.
It is therefore very difficult in a world that is built on the laws of business because Russia is embedded in these laws and regulations. From a legal point of view, this is normal, but from a moral and geopolitical point of view, it is, if not a crime, then very incorrect actions towards a country that is suffering from an enemy in the form of the Russian Federation. The situation is very complicated, and there will be no easy solutions. But I tend to believe that although it sounds cynical, Russia will sooner or later push the world either to a bigger war or to an adequate response. We will watch what happens because the situation is unfolding in an extraordinary way.
Чи пізно підштовхне світ або до більшої війни, або до адекватної реакції.
Будемо спостерігати точніше за тим, що відбувається, тому що ситуація насправді розгортається надзвичайно динамічно. І якщо до неї динамічно пристосовуватися і підштовхувати, навіть не підштовхувати,
By urging our partners to react in specific areas, we may have a chance to change something. Oleh, thank you for the conversation and for joining us today. I'd like to remind you that we had a call with Oleh Lisnyi, president of the Politica think tank, with whom we discussed the current situation on the international scene.